Hi guys, my name is Momo, and today we're going to be talking about the common concepts in biology, which, as you know, is the first topic in our course outline for this semester. Now, I'm sure we're going to be familiar with a lot of the concepts we're going to be covering today. However, they're going to be more detailed, and they're going to introduce more things that we weren't taught in secondary school. So please pay attention. Number one is the first thing we're going to look at today is the hierarchy of organization. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with the hierarchy of organization, which is like cell, tissue, organ system. However, this one is going to be more organized, and it's going to start with the atom. So the atoms are the building blocks of matter. Everything is made of atoms. I'm sure you've heard of this before. We are all made of atoms. And the atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. They are the smallest unit of matter that still contains the chemical properties of an element. I'm not really going to go too deep into the atom today. That's not our goal. We're not chemistry students. So the next one we're going to be covering in the next stage in the hierarchy of organization is molecules. And the molecules are a group of two or more atoms bound together, and they carry the chemical properties of the atom that makes them up. And the next one are the organelles. Now, organelles are they take up the position of organs in the cell. However, they are very, very tiny. You know, cells are microscopic, so the organelles are like the organs of the cell, and they help the cell to perform, or rather they perform specific functions inside the cell. Examples of these are ribosomes, lysosomes, endoplasmic reticulums, nucleus, etc., etc. I'm sure you're already familiar with this. And now we're going to get into more familiar territory, which is the cell. And we all know what the cell is. It is the smallest unit of life. Everybody has cells. Every living organism has cells. And now we're going to explain more on cells. A cell, I'm sure you know, there are two types of cells. There are the prokaryotic and there are the eukaryotic cells. The prokaryotic is what we're going to explain first. So one thing you should know is that they are called prokaryotic because they come from two words. They are Greek words. The first one is pro, which is before, and the second one is karyon, which is nucleus. So it means before nucleus. And a prokaryotic cell is a single-celled microorganism that lacks a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles due to the absence of internal membranes. An example of this is bacteria. The next one is the eukaryotic cell. So we know that the prokaryotic means before nucleus. Eukaryotic is also made up of two Greek words. The first one is eu, which means true or good, and karyon, as we heard before, means nucleus. So we know that this one, eukaryotic, means true nucleus. And a eukaryotic cell is an organism or a cell which contains a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles. An example of this is an amoeba. Now the next part of the hierarchy of organization we'll be covering are the tissues. So what are tissues? A tissue is composed of a group of cells or fluid that works together to perform a specific job in the body. They are absent in unicellular organisms and are classified into two: plant tissues and the animal tissues. The plant tissues mainly give support to the plants because, as we know, plants are stationary and they do need security so that they don't, die quickly, or they are not trampled on, or they don't go to the winds. First type of plant tissue is the dermal tissue. This is the outer covering of the plants. It's the bark, the part that provides that outer protection for the inners of the plant. And the second are the vascular tissues. These ones move water and nutrients towards different parts of the plants. And the ground tissue This makes up most of the plant's bodies and perform the majority of its bodily functions, like photosynthesis. And some examples of these ground tissues are collenchyma, the sclerenchyma, the parenchyma, and the phloem. And the last type of plant tissue is the meristematic tissue. The meristematic tissue are groups of cells that divide and create new growth for the plants. In other words, they are responsible for plant growth. And now we're going to go to the animal tissues. These are groups of cells that work together to perform specific functions in the body of an animal. An example of this, an example of like an animal with these animal tissues is us, humans, human beings. Large multicellular animals, we are made up of four main types of animal tissues. The first one is the epithelial tissue. This is the skin on your body and your small intestine. And then we have the connective tissues, which help us with movement. Examples of these are the bones, the ligaments, the tendons, the fats, and the other soft padding tissue in our body. And then we have the muscle tissue, and there are three main types of muscles. We have skeletal muscles, we have cardiac muscles, and we have smooth muscles. So nervous tissue is the last animal tissue we have. They consist of two main types of cell neurons or nerve cells and glial cells or neuroglia, e.g. nerves and the nervous tissues of the brain and the spinal cord. So the next one we shall be covering in the hierarchy of organization are the organs. The organs are structures composed of one or more types of tissues to carry out a specific function. Examples of organs are liver, lungs, skin, eyes, things like that. And so the next part of our hierarchy of organization is going to be the organ systems. Groups of organs that work together to perform a specific function. An organ system is made up of groups of organs that work together to perform a specific function. An example will be the integumentary system. And this system acts as a barrier to invading organisms and chemicals, and it protects us from injury and fluid loss and help us to control our temperature. So the next part will be our multicellular organisms. This is the next stage of our hierarchy of organization. So a multicellular organism or an organism is composed of more than one cell with cells specialized to perform specific functions. Now, multicellular organisms can be small. However, we are multicellular organisms. We as humans are multicellular organisms. And we are exponentially bigger than unicellular organisms. We are much more capable of more complex and much more intricate things than unicellular organisms. We are capable of movement, respiration, um, we are capable of movement, we are capable of respiration, we are capable of excretion, etc. So many different things. That's because of what we are made up of. The next level of the hierarchy of organization we are going to be looking at is the population. A population is a group of organisms of the same species living in the same area at a specific time. So, as I'm sure you know, the population of humans right now is 8 billion and counting, of course. But that's just of humans, not of everyone. We are of the same species and we all reside on planet Earth. And the next part of the hierarchy of organization is the community. A community is made up of two or more groups of different populations of organisms interacting with one another. So an example of a community would be, imagine 10 rabbits. 10 rabbits is a population. It is a population of 10, as I said before, rabbits. Now a community would be 10 rabbits and three dogs. Those three dogs, because are also a population, but those two populations will begin to interact with each other. Obviously, they will interact in the way of predator and prey, but that interaction makes them a community. And a community must be stable. A community has to have enough resources to go around. If not, it will collapse. And that will also lead to the collapse of ecosystems, which is the next part of our hierarchy of organization. So the ecosystem is a group of multiple communities. It is a group of multiple communities of organisms interacting with their physical environments and each other. These physical environments includes, what do you call it again, biotic and abiotic factors. They can be, ecosystems can be of different sizes, but its balance is crucial for its survival. And now, the last part of our hierarchy of organization is the biosphere. This is the largest, you know, this is the largest part of like the hierarchy of organization. It covers everything that we've talked about previously. A biosphere is the global sum of all ecosystems and all zones of life on Earth, including the air, land, and the ocean. The biosphere extends itself to the deepest parts of the oceans and the farthest parts of the Earth. And so we have moved on from the hierarchy of organization. The next thing we are going to cover in the common concept of biology is the metabolism. Now, the metabolism is the entirety, and I mean the entirety of the physical and chemical processes that take place in an organism, whereby its material substance is produced, maintained, and destroyed, and by which energy is made available for us to use. So the metabolism is everything that happens in us to allow us to continue to survive. The way our food is broken down, the way what is broken down is built up to give us energy, to give us nutrients for us to survive. That is metabolism. The purpose of metabolism is, number one, is the conversion of food to run cellular processes. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the mitochondria. The mitochondria you do need to eat to provide energy for the mitochondria. And that what the energy that is transformed, that is broken down for the mitochondria to use, is then used for the cellular processes to take place. Another purpose of metabolism is the conversion of food substances to building blocks for proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, and some carbohydrates. And last of all, the purpose another purpose of metabolism is the removal of metabolic wastes. Metabolic waste, yeah, like urea and nitrogen, etc. The metabolic processes, which is the metabolism, are divided into two. Number one is catabolism, and number two is anabolism. So catabolism refers to the breakdown of complex molecules into smaller molecules or monomers, thereby releasing energy which is available to use for us, for our bodies, for our cellular processes. Catabolism takes in like the food we eat and it breaks it down into little pieces so that our body can absorb them and use them to fulfill our cellular needs. An example of this process would be glycolysis. And now we also have anabolism. Anabolic reactions build molecules that the body needs to function. It provides substances required for cellular growth and repair. Now, there are some differences of catabolism between catabolism and anabolism that you need to take note of. The first difference is that for catabolism, they break down big and complex molecules into smaller, easier to absorb molecules. While anabolism builds molecules required for the body's functionality. If you Catabolism breaks down and anabolism builds up. Another difference is that catabolism releases energy. Catabolism takes the food that we eat and it releases the energy in there, while the anabolism requires energy. It requires energy to merge those different small molecules into bigger molecules. It can't just do it out of nowhere. And the hormones involved in catabolism are adrenaline, glucagon, cortisol, and cytokine. While the hormones that are necessary for anabolism are testosterone, growth hormones, and insulin. Potential for catabolism, potential energy changes to kinetic energy. While in anabolism, kinetic energy changes to potential energy. And lastly, for catabolism, it is required to perform different activities in living entities. And for anabolism, it is required for maintenance, growth, and storage. But anabolism helps us to maintain, it helps us to store, it helps us to grow as well. The next thing we'll be covering will be the interdependency of organisms. Now, the interdependency of organisms, you would already have an idea of that from when we were talking about it in the ecosystem and the biosphere and the communities. Ecosystem is a good example of an environmental community. It shows truly how much we as organisms depend on each other. An example for this would be how bees help to pollinate flowers, but at the same time, they collect food for themselves. They collect food for the continuation of their life, and for the betterment of their hive. So on one hand, they do get food from it, but the flowers are able to reproduce with their help, ensuring their survival and ensuring their continuation. That is a very, very good example of the interdependency that we as organisms have on each other in the entire ecosystem. The next thing we shall be covering is our unity in diversity. Organisms share a universal genetic coding system. This will be spoken about later on in another topic, but yes, we all originate from one source, and that one source is the genetic code. And the more related two species are, the more characteristics they are likely to share, which is why I think an example of this would be for the monkeys and the humans. We share quite a lot of characteristics with them, and we are closely related with monkeys, genetically speaking, of course. We're also going to talk about how biological information is inherited. This is another concept in biology. How biological information is inherited. The genetic information is encoded in the nucleotide sequence called DNA, which is the deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is the molecule that holds hereditary information, which is inherited by offspring from their parents. The gene is a segment of DNA that codes for specific traits. Evolution in biology is another concept that is very, very important for us to understand. So, evolution can be defined as the change in a species that happens over a span of a very, very long time. This this occurs through natural selection, which is the theory that was of evolution that was proposed by Charles Darwin. In natural selection, an organism a mutation occurs naturally in the environment, and should that mutation be beneficial for the organism will survive and pass down its genes to other organisms of its species, and given enough time, that's traits will continue to be passed down until it has affected and it has spread throughout the entire species, which would then, be evolution. And the last part of common concepts of biology that we need to understand is the properties of life. So The properties of life are our Mr. Niger D, but a few more things have been added and some things have been removed. Guys, and now the last common concept of biology that we need to understand are the properties of life. So this covers the Mr. Niger D that we were taught when we were younger. However, a few more elements have been added to it. So the first property of life we'll be talking about is metabolism, which we've already spoken about. It can be defined as all the totality of the chemical processes which happen within an organism to keep it functional and stable. And number two, the second one will be reproduction, which is the ability of an organism to give rise to another organism of the same species to ensure the continuation of life. Nutrition is the ability of an organism to take in the nutrients into their body, break it down, and let them be utilized to help them grow and develop, and etc. Irritability, the ability to respond to stimuli. Growth, the increase in size and complexity of the organism. Respiration, this is the process of exchanging gases with the environment, and in the process breaking down nutrients into energy. Death, which is the ending of the organism's conscience, the stopping of all metabolic processes. And homeostasis, which is the regulation of internal conditions to maintain stability despite external changes. An example of this would be shivering during cold, and another example would be sweating when in like hot places or in hot climates. And with that, thank you for watching the video. I hope this was of help, and I hope you all have a good day.